6:45, this is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The news edited by Danishka Madhavala, read by Soundithavam. Sri Lanka's president questions the double standards of the international community over the humanitarian crisis. The Korean president commends strengthened ties with Sri Lanka and pledges continued cooperation. A landmark $15 million grant strengthens Buddhist ties between India and Sri Lanka. The maximum retail price for white and brown sugar declared. Litro gas prices to be increased from today. 11 Sri Lankans leave Gaza through the Rafah border crossing and currently in Egypt. In foreign news, Netanyahu rejects temporary ceasefire in Gaza unless hostages freed. And in sports, Afghanistan beat the Netherlands to boost semi-final hopes. Addressing the gathering of the opening of the courts complex in Valimada yesterday, President Ranil Wickremesinghe drew attention to the contrasting approaches of the international community when it comes to addressing human rights concerns in Sri Lanka and Gaza. President Wickremesinghe highlighted that both regions are facing significant human rights challenges, but the responses from the West appear to differ significantly. Referring to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, President Wickremesinghe emphasized that every country must adhere to this crucial document. He pointed out that when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, the Sri Lankan government swiftly condemned the act, reaffirming their support for the principle of Palestinian statehood while denouncing terrorism. This condemnation, he noted, allows for Israel's right of retaliation within the framework of international laws and rules. However, the president expressed concern that such principles did not seem to apply universally. He noted that the killing of over 10,000 people in the Gaza Strip, according to UN agencies, raised concerns and questions about the justifiability of warfare within one's own country and the response of the international community. President Wickremesinghe further pointed out that the West, including the USA, had passed resolutions against Sri Lanka for its human rights record. He questioned why there was a difference in the approach taken by these nations towards Sri Lanka and Gaza, where similar issues were prevalent. He stressed that the same rule should apply to both regions. The president highlighted that according to international law, measures taken to combat terrorism must fully comply with the state's obligations. In a significant diplomatic exchange, President Yoon Suk-yeol of the Republic of Korea expressed his deep appreciation for the fruitful discussions held with President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Their meeting took place on September 18th in conjunction with the high-level meetings of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. President Yoon Suk-yeol lauded the meeting as a vital step in fortifying the bilateral relations between the two nations. Following his return to Korea, he promptly issued directives to relevant ministries for the execution of major cooperation projects that were deliberated during the meetings. These initiatives encompass the development of programs aimed at generating employment opportunities for young people, the reinforcement of employment cooperation, and the signing of the Agreement of Cooperation on Climate Change. Furthermore, they also decided to enhance their trade and investment collaboration through the Trade and Investment Bureau framework. Of particular note was President Wickremesinghe's assertion on the importance of strengthening bilateral relations at a time when the Republic of Korea is expanding its involvement in the Indo-Pacific region. President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged to continue his efforts in fostering these vital ties and expressed eagerness to meet with President Wickremesinghe once again in the near future. In closing, President Yoon Suk-yeol extended his warmest wishes for President Wickremesinghe's continued good health, emphasizing the shared commitment to furthering the bonds of friendship and cooperation between their countries. In a significant event held in Colombo, the exchange of bilateral documents took center stage, marking the initiation of projects supported by a generous $15 million grant from the government of India. This grant is specially allocated to bolster the long-standing Buddhist connections between India and Sri Lanka, underscoring the deep historical and cultural ties that bind these two nations together. The signing of the bilateral agreements took place at the President's house in Colombo on Thursday. President Wickremesinghe and the Honourable Finance Minister of India, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, engaged in lengthy bilateral discussions during this event. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement of this substantial grant underscores the significance of strengthening Buddhist linkages between the two countries. The grant could be allocated towards various initiatives, including the construction and renovation of Buddhist monasteries, capacity development, cultural exchange, archaeological cooperation, reciprocal exhibition of relics, and other areas of mutual interest. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Litrogas Lanka is slated to announce a price hike today. According to the company's chairman, Mudita Piris, the price of a 12.5 kilogram domestic gas cylinder is expected to be increased by at least 75 rupees. He attributed the move to the price increase in the global market. In the months that have elapsed this year, Litrogas has increased its prices on 3 occasions and reduced the rates on 5 occasions. Following the rate revision in October, the price of a 12.5 kilogram domestic gas cylinder now stands at 3,470 rupees. The Consumer Affairs Authority yesterday announced a maximum retail price for sugar by way of an extraordinary gazette. Accordingly, the maximum retail price for both brown and white sugar was stipulated in a communiqué effective from yesterday. The maximum retail price for white sugar packeted is 295 rupees per kilogram and 235 rupees per kilogram for unpacked. The maximum retail price for brown sugar packeted are 350 rupees per kilogram and 330 rupees per kilogram unpacked. 11 Sri Lankans have left Gaza through the Rafah border crossing and are now in Egypt. They were able to leave Gaza yesterday after the Rafah border crossing was opened for the second consecutive day for selected foreign nationals and dual citizens to leave Palestine. Initially, authorities had given permission for 17 Sri Lankans to leave Gaza. However, only 11 Lankans have been able to use the Rafah border crossing and enter Egypt. They are currently at a hotel in Egypt. That concludes local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Sinhala Mahatmya.
State Minister Suren Raghavan said a sum of 255 billion rupees has been allocated for primary and secondary education in the year 2024. Further, 210 billion rupees will be allocated for higher education. A Deputy Vice-Chancellor will be appointed to each state university by the end of next year. The State Minister revealed this information at a media conference held at the Presidential Media Centre yesterday. That was the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Sinhala Mahatmya.
On to Watchlight, the National Child Protection Authority has received 7,523 complaints in the first 8 months of 2023. More than 4,000 complaints are related to crimes against children and children in need of care, compulsory education and cruelty. That came to you in Watchlight. Onto a bulletin of world news. Making headlines this morning, Netanyahu rejects temporary ceasefire in Gaza unless hostages freed. At least 69 dead as strong quake rocks northwestern Nepal. And Taylor Swift's 1989 re-recording scores record-breaking UK chart debut. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there will be no temporary ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza until all Israeli hostages are released. He gave a televised address after talks with U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who's called for humanitarian pauses in the fighting to help protect civilians. Israel has struck an ambulance in Gaza it said was being used by Hamas operatives. The Hamas-run health ministry said Israel had targeted a convoy of ambulances in 2 different places, including outside the Al-Shifa hospital. The Palestinian Red Crescent says 15 civilians were killed and dozens injured when an ambulance was struck outside Al-Shifa hospital. Meanwhile, Israel's army said earlier it was on a very high alert as its border with Lebanon as the leader of the Islamist group Hezbollah broke his silence on the war. In a speech watched by thousands at a Beirut rally, Hassan Nasrallah praised the Hamas attack on Israel on 7th October, but said they were 100% Palestinian. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says more than 9,000 people have been killed in the strip since 7th October. Israel began bombing Gaza after Hamas killed more than 1,400 people in Israel and kidnapped more than 200 others. A strong earthquake shook northwestern Nepal districts just before midnight Friday, and officials said at least 69 people were dead and dozens more injured as rescuers searched mountain villages. Officials said early Saturday that the death toll could rise, noting that communications were cut off with many places. The quake, which hit when many people already were asleep in their homes, was felt in India's capital New Delhi, more than 800 kilometers away. The US Geological Survey said the earthquake had a preliminary magnitude of 5.6 and occurred at a depth of 11 miles. Nepal's National Earthquake Monitoring and Research Centre said its epicenter was at Jajarkot, which is about 250 miles northeast of the Nepalese capital Kathmandu. In a year of record-breaking achievements, Taylor Swift has done it again. A re-recording of her crossover pop album 1989 has become the UK's fastest-selling record of 2023. 1989, Taylor's version shifted 184,000 copies last week, more than double the opening week sales of the 2014 original. It is the only album released this year to go gold in a single week, and is Swift's 11th UK number one overall. Among female artists, only Madonna has more chart toppers, and Swift is now within touching distance of her record of 12. 1989, Taylor's version was also the week's biggest-selling record on vinyl, with almost 62,000 copies sold, and 3 of the album's songs have debuted in the top 10s in the singles chart. Back to the headlines of the world news. Netanyahu rejects temporary ceasefire in Gaza unless hostages freed. At least 69 dead as strong quake rocks northwestern Nepal. And Taylor Swift's 1989 re-recording scores record-breaking UK chart debut. That concludes this bulletin of world news.
Development news.
Gull Oil Plantations Private Limited will invest in constructing a bio-unit to produce more effective biofertilizers and reduce the use of chemical fertilizers. Executive Director of the Gull Oil Plantation Company, Danesh Aberatna, said the company presently boasts of one of the largest organic fertilizer yards in Sri Lanka, capable of producing over 7,000 metric tons per year. The new project includes expanding the existing compost yard, establishing a pulverizing unit, and a soil lab. The goal is to introduce new fertilizer products to the country and encourage farmers to cultivate with biofertilizers. Improvements in biofertilizer production have already begun. That's development news.
Moving on with sports news.
Afghanistan continued their late search for a place in the World Cup semi-finals with a 7-wicket win over the Netherlands in Lucknow. The victory moves Afghanistan level with Australia and New Zealand on 8 points, with only net run rate now keeping them out of the top 4. Hastamullah Shahidi hit an unbeaten 56 as Afghanistan passed their target of 180 with 18.3 overs to spare. The Netherlands were earlier dismissed for 179 inside 47 overs. Meanwhile, world number 1 Novak Djokovic held off Olga Rune to reach the semi-finals of the Paris Masters. Rune beat the Serb in last year's final to claim his first ATP Masters title. Djokovic will play Alex de Minaur of Australia or Russian world number 5 Andrei Rublev for a place in his 9th Paris Masters final. That concludes sports news.
Go ekakiyana youth කට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගීන හැබැ කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru account, NSB IAM, a plan for your dream.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Apple sales have continued to fall despite strong demand for its iPhones and services like streaming platform Apple TV+. The tech giant says revenues dipped 1% to $89.5 billion in the 3 months to September 30th when compared with the same period last year. The sales of its Mac computers and iPads struggled after a post-lockdown surge in interest. It marks the 4th quarter in a row where sales have fallen year on year. In an update to investors, the firm said that profits had reached $23 billion, helped by a new record for iPhone sales in the 3-month period. That's business news. Economic news up next.
Business News, Sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go එකක් තියන youth එකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru account. NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
On to economic news. One of the world's biggest shipping firms is to cut 3,500 more jobs due to the low freight rates and demand. AP Moller Maersk already cut 6,500 roles earlier this year as part of rigorous cost containment measures, but said more redundancies were needed. The firm, which transports goods for major retailers such as Nike, said profits had plunged by 92% in most the recently quarter results. It said worsening prices for shipping by sea required further job cuts. The cost of shipping goods soared in the first year of COVID when lockdowns lifted and businesses began to resume trading, increasing their orders for stock. That's economic news.
Weather report.
The prevailing showery weather condition is expected to continue today as well. Showers or thundershowers will occur over most parts of the island after 1 p.m. Heavy showers above 100 millimeters are likely at some places in the Sabaragamuwa, Central, Uva and North Central provinces, also in the Puttalam and Mannar districts. Fairly heavy showers above 50 millimeters are likely at some places elsewhere. Showers will occur in the Western province and in the Puttalam and Mannar districts during the morning as well. Misty conditions can be expected at some places in the Sabaragamuwa, Central and Uva provinces during the morning. To conclude this bulletin of news, a recap of the headlines. Sri Lanka's president questions the double standards of the international community over the humanitarian crisis. The Korean president commends strengthened ties with Sri Lanka and pledges continued cooperation. A landmark $15 million grant strengthens Buddhist ties between India and Sri Lanka. The maximum retail price for white and brown sugar declared. Litro gas prices to be increased from today. 11 Sri Lankans leave Gaza through the Rafah border crossing and are currently in Egypt. Netanyahu rejects temporary ceasefire in Gaza unless hostages freed. And Afghanistan beat the Netherlands to boost semi-final hopes. And on that note, we conclude this morning's news broadcast. And now it's back to your host across the glass pane, Sanal, all geared, set and ready to keep you entertained this beautiful Saturday morning. It's bright and sunny outside, Sanal, and you at the sunshine over the airwaves of Radio Sri Lanka. It's all yours.